But let's talk about Rachel Reeves, because she's the woman who is supposedly going to fix the economy of this country. But there's a lot of suggestions right now that she's about to rip up whatever budget plans that she had, because they're not really working. Julian Jessop is here to talk us through it. Julian, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. It looks as though an awful lot of what Rachel Reeves put together in terms of the VAT on private schools, the tax rate on pensions possibly, certainly the non-dom probes and attacks are all going to be chucked out the window because they've worked out that they're actually not going to be very successful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. What seems to have happened is that, being in opposition is easy, but when you get into government, you have to deal with the real world. And I think the government has had a crash course in two things. One is that incentives actually matter. So if you threaten people who have choices with big tax increases, then they change their behaviour, and you end up not making a lot of money and possibly losing it. And the second thing they've learned is that raising all this spectre of higher taxes and big spending cuts can dampen confidence in the economy. So we've seen business confidence falter, consumer confidence down, people are delaying investment, they're delaying recruitment, and that's having a negative impact on the economy even before any of this has actually happened.
Right.
I think the government definitely needs to do a fundamental rethink of what it's planning at the end of the month.
Yes, and I think politically speaking, they're probably not where they expected to be. I mean, judging by the noises they made before the election and judging by the noises that they've made since, it's all gone a bit wrong, hasn't it? Because, Sue Gray, the architect, supposedly the first 100 days, didn't actually make 100 days, and she's gone. We've now got Morgan McSweeney running everything. Rachel Reeves is discovering that, the monies that she thought she might make on paper are clearly not going to come through. I mean, supposedly these three tax commitments were going to raise about 4.8 billion out of 8.6 billion, but it looks like they're going to get nothing like that.
Well, there's certainly been a sea change of attitude in the markets as well. Initially, there was a lot of optimism about a Labour government coming in with a big majority, a period of political stability. But that honeymoon period seems to have been very brief indeed. If anything, the divorce seems to have started already. And lots of investors are starting to get nervous about what will be in the budget. In particular, there's a huge increase in borrowing to pay for increases in investment. That may well mean higher interest rates. So that's another headwind that the economy can do without.
Well, they've made a lot of noise about the £22 billion black hole. Not so much now that the Treasury says, actually, we're not sure we can be specific about where that money is and where it's gone. But they're plenty happy to spend £22 billion on all manner of other things, like net zero. They're very happy to spend it on public sector pay rises. And suddenly, they can't have it both ways. You can't say on the one hand, we haven't got any money, and on the other hand, reserve a load of money for a bunch of projects that you like.
Well, I personally don't have a problem with an increase in borrowing for investment if the infrastructure projects that you're going to finance are good ones and sensible ones. But I'm not sure that much of Ed Miliband's green agenda fits into that category.
No. Carbon capture, specifically carbon capture, is an untried sort of rather revolutionary technology, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not really an expert on that. I do know some people are a bit more enthusiastic about it, and it might be worth spending a few billion just to see if we can get technology that's effective. But it certainly seems odd for us to be spending so much money on this when, as we know, the bulk of the global emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases are coming from China, not from the UK.
Right. Well, let's have a look at what Rachel Reeves said in February 2023. These were what you might describe for Labour as happier times.
We've said that all of our plans will be fully costed and fully funded.
I mean, that's what they used to say. That was the mantra, wasn't it? Everything's fully costed, everything's fully funded, government of service, we're not going to do anything that we can't afford. I mean, that's all gone out the window now as well. They never say it anymore.
Well, this is something that Liz Truss, who you may remember, used to call abacus economics. And I think she had a strong point here that if you look, for example, at the Labour manifesto, there's this, a small number of tax increases in there specifically allocated to fund lots of little increases in spending here and there.
Right.
And if part of that jigsaw falls away, then the whole thing just collapses. And this is the problem that Labour's got into. It's not looking at the bigger picture, the need to create an environment where people are happy to spend, where businesses are happy to invest and to create jobs. Instead, they're tinkering around, trying to find a few billion here, a few billion there. I think the one hope in the budget might be that Rachel Reeves finally looks again at the fiscal rules that we have that set the overall envelope for public spending and tax. And if she could make those a bit more sensible, that could be something that everybody would welcome. But at the moment, we're just faffing around, worrying about a few billion here, a few billion there. They're just making everybody's lives miserable and weakening the economy at the same time.
Yeah. Just in case anyone was wondering what we're watching there, we were just watching Angela Rayner arriving at Downing Street for a cabinet meeting this morning. I mean, I think as everybody is saying now, it's a lot more difficult to govern than it is to be in opposition, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In particular, when you actually have to make proposals that would have a real impact, it's dead easy in opposition to say, we will do this and we will do that and get lots of positive headlines. But when you're faced with the cold reality of your decisions actually mattering, affecting the economy and affecting real people's lives, and people responding in ways you don't necessarily want them to do, like, rich investors moving overseas or people not starting a business in the first place, then things are much, much, much harder.
Absolutely right. Good to talk to you, Julian. Thanks very much indeed. Julian Jessop there, independent economist and fellow at the IEA. Fully funded and fully costed. Do you remember it? They never stopped saying it, did they? They just never shut up about it. And we're going to be responsible. We're going to be the party of service. We're going to be forgetting about all the psychodramas. Well, none of it's true.